growing your business. Do I raise money to fund my startup? Are you considering whether to raise funding or to grow your business? If so, you won't want to miss this lunch session. And if you're online, you can't see how folks are all in the audience and having this working lunch because they know how important this topic is. We have our moderator with us, Brian Cox, who is an integrator. He is integral in running the day-to-day operations of the Traction Capital. Brian is a successful entrepreneur and current owner and general manager of Simply Ride, the largest used motorcycle dealer in the region. Brian started Simply Ride while attending the University of St. Thomas right here. So please give it up for Brian Cox.
Thanks, appreciate that. Hello and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us in person, and also a big hello to everyone online. I know the in-person people are enjoying lunch, and hopefully everyone online got awesome sandwiches at their own house or wherever they might be. As mentioned, I'm Brian. I'm an entrepreneur like many of you. I'm also the integrator and president at Traction Capital, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But Traction Capital is a hybrid private equity and venture capital fund comprised of entrepreneurs and focused on investing smart money in companies in Minnesota and also our neighboring states. We provide capital that companies need to grow to help attain an exit. We also help them with processes. We do that through our current and our previous management experience through companies we've owned, and we know what it takes to run a company. So you're welcome to read more about us and the resources that we offer. There's some handouts up front, or find us online at tractioncapital.com. But more importantly, today we have an amazing panel of entrepreneurs here to talk about their own experiences capitalizing their companies in different ways. Hopefully this will help as you consider whether or not to raise capital to fund your startup. But before we dive into panel introductions, I'd like to kind of take a look at the audience here. We're just going to, there we go. We're just going to take a look at the audience here. And so I know there are a lot of people joining online. So people that are online, if you can just respond by chat. I'm wondering how many of you are founders or are business owners? Raise hands in here. Founders or business owners? All right. Looks like maybe 10, 12. Online, are we getting some chats? Anybody saying, I'm a business owner, I'm a founder? I know there's a delay. There's a little delay. Okay, so we're waiting to hear. Tell you what, we're going to check back with the online folks in a second. So online folks, how many of you have already raised capital for your business? And also people in person. Who has raised capital for their business? Looks like a lot of people on the panel, one over here, one in the back over there. And we're going to check back in with online here in a second. How many have bootstrapped a company? Pulled yourself up from the bootstraps. It looks like a lot of people. I've bootstrapped. Okay, they've done it all, right? And who's here just because Twin Cities Startup Week is awesome? Huh? Everybody, all right? Awesome. Kelly, can we find out who online? Is there a lot of people that have bootstrapped? A lot of people that have, okay. Okay, awesome. So we're hearing a whole bunch of bootstrapping and not as many as raised capital. Did I hear that correctly? Excellent. All right. Also, we're going to ask questions of the panel in a second, but I also would like to hear questions from the audience and online. So please be thinking of questions that you might have for the panel. You're welcome to chat those questions in at any time. And if you do ask a question live in person, please have a microphone. So whatever your business or the stage that you're at, our goal today is for you to come away with some specific things that you might be able to learn about capital. So I'm going to intro the panel, and then they're going to jump in. First off, we have Shane Erickson. He's an experienced entrepreneur with expertise in venture investing. Most recently, he served as the co-founder and CEO of IMC, and he's the general partner at Traction Capital. I call him the brains behind the operation. We also have a panel, and our panels got mixed up in the last 24 hours. So what you see up here might not be exactly who you see on stage, and it's because we're entrepreneurs. We just have to run with it, right? So online and virtual, we have Barb Stinnett. Barb, if you can say hello, wave hi. There we go.
Hi, everyone.
Awesome. We can hear her. That's great. She's an extensive background, including acting as manager partner of multiple funds. She also serves on she's the founder and CEO of Timmaron Group, and she serves on the Traction Capital Advisory Board. We have Matt Meents. He is CEO of Yardstik, SaaS background screening company founded in 2020. And Matt also founded Magnet 360 in 2001, which he later led to exit. Andrew Duneman could not be here today. And in his place, we have the legendary Tyler Olsen. Tyler and I are Tommies together. We went to school together back in the day. He's an award-winning entrepreneur in several tech fields. And then Joe Morris. We have Joe here. Joe is a seasoned executive, having worked with Toro, SuperValue, 3M, and GMAC, and he's also led 3 tech businesses, high-tech businesses as well. So that's a very brief introduction. I would love to kick it over to the panel. Tell us a little bit more about your experience, your background, and give us one anecdote on your funding journey. Shane, you want to start us off?
Sure. I've been a lifetime entrepreneur, 30-plus years, and antidote around capital raising, if you just look for cash, that's what you're going to end up with. In my opinion, when you go to look for an investor, you should look for more than just money, and really understand what you're looking for from help, because money goes away. That goes away quickly, but if somebody's on your team that'll really help you long term, that's going to be good.
Excellent. Thanks, Shane. Barb, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. About the same amount of time with Shane, about 30-plus years. First part of the career was in corporate and really learning how to invest and buy into entrepreneurial firms. So a little bit different background of being the acquirer or the funder of those. And then in the second half of my career, I've spent building companies, starting companies, funding, and helping them either roll up or go through their IPOs or exits. I think the topic for today is really important because do I want to raise? And if so, what does that mean? So for me, that was a big learning through my journey on when do you take money, when don't you? And then if you do accept, to Shane's point, where is the smart money?
Excellent. Joe.
My first half of my career was large corporations, like Brian mentioned, but even in those corporations, I was known as the maverick. I was always doing the new upfront things, bringing the new things into those corporations. When I left corporations, I had internet startups. I had some that failed, some that succeeded, some I bought and grew and sold. And today about raising money, you know, it's for a founder and a business starter, it's to me, the most unenjoyable thing I ever had to do, but necessary evil, and we'll have a lot of discussion about that later.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. Matt.
Yeah, it's a great topic for today. You know, the last 20 years, my first company, Magnet 360, we bootstrapped up until we raised money from Salesforce Ventures to help us grow and expand. So I did get kind of the bootstrap and the venture. And Yardstik is a completely venture-backed. So I'm doing both sides of the coin here, and I have a lot of perspective on you know, pros and cons of each.
Excellent. Tyler?
I've been starting businesses since the age of 12, and I've had several technology companies since. Raised money a few times for a social media marketing company. Actually, 2 of the panelists here invested into Modern Foundation and recently started Shield, and we're raising money with that business as well. One of the tips I got when I was young is when you ask for money, you'll get advice. When you ask for advice, you'll get money. And so I've implemented that in my life, and it's helped out.
I like that. I like that anecdote. Thank you. So let's ask some questions. Let's have a learning experience from the panel, and we really would like to get the audience involved. So if you have a question online, please chat it in, and we will ask questions throughout. It's not going to be me talking. I know we'd all get bored of that. Number 1, how did you decide when it was time to seek outside investment in your business? Or if you decided not to seek outside investment, how did you do that? Joe.
For me, it was when our growth curve and to accomplish it outgrew our financial wherewithal. So, you know, we started with friends and family, started really small, but as we got our product created, products developed, put together a growth curve, and we couldn't fund it. So that's when we started looking for capital. It was on that trajectory to match the 2.
Anything else to add? Anyone else?
Yeah, when my first business started, I was 22 years old, and I found two partners who had inventory along with mine to start the business. And my parents took out a $25,000 home equity loan to lend to me. About 6 months in, I figured out that I had moved through most of that money pretty quick and found an investor. Might seem strange to everybody, but I gave up 20% of my business for $25,000. And he made about $500,000 over the next 4 years. And I have zero regrets because he gave me access and knowledge that I didn't have at 22 years old.
Excellent. What kind of process did you go through, and what does it look like if you're going out to find an investor or to find funding? Barb, do you have experience on this you could share?
Well, we've had, the good, the bad, and the ugly. When you go out and look for money, I think there's really kind of three pieces that we follow. First of all, what is the money going to be used for? And if it needs to be for R&D or for go-to-market or global distribution, looking for functionally money from people that actually can help you with that in an early stage is very helpful. So functional alignment is important. The second piece that we follow is looking at industry. In the Twin Cities, we have a lot of life sciences and healthcare, a lot of SaaS applications. And again, checking an investor, not only functionally can they help you expand, but from an industry standpoint, do they have contacts? Do they have the ability to really help you grow in your market is secondary. And the third piece that we follow when we say smart money is also just, and most important, is culture. Is, you could have somebody that really functionally understands what you need and they understand the industry, but if the culture does not feel right, the chemistry doesn't feel right, your gut is probably right, and that's always the hardest to make determination on, do you accept those funds or not? But those are the three key bullets that we follow.
I feel like it's almost a hiring process where you want a good culture fit for the company and also the investor. I know Matt knows culture. Anything you want to jump in and say there?
Yeah, culture is very, very important to show that alignment to your investors and how you're growing. For Magnet 360, when we started out, we were working out of our homes. I was working at a dining room table, and I wanted an office. I wanted to invest. I wanted to do all the things, and my business partner is like, go sell something. And I was like, but I'm sitting at this dining room chair, and it's hurting my back. And he's like, if you sell something, you can go to Office Depot and buy a $50 ergonomic chair. And that was the relationship we had as our startup. It was like, go prove it, go sell it, go get it done. And as we started to get product market fit and really focus is key. When we focused in on Salesforce.com and started getting a lot of traction, a lot of success with that and growing it, Salesforce actually came to us and said, we want to help you expand because we love what you're doing because you're so focused. You want to be the best in the world at Salesforce.com, and we want to help you with that. So that focus and culture and just being smart about the early stages of bootstrapping is really important to be thinking about as far as when to go look for it. I would have raised it in Magnet. I would have raised it all day one, and I probably would have lost it all day two. But with my help from a business partner keeping me honest, we did what we did, and it was a lot of fun.
Any more that you'd like to add, any of you, on what that process feels like and looks like to go out and find investment? And then we're going to get to some audience questions online.
It's a lot more time-consuming than I think many entrepreneurs believe it will be up front. I felt lucky. I met Shane when I was 21 years old, maybe even 20 years old, and at 23 raised my first round of capital with the marketing business. And it was so valuable to have somebody who is a friend, is a partner, is a strategic partner for you, that believes in you, that is a culture fit to help you in that process. And I find that having investors who are willing and able to connect you to others and or strategic fits for the business is extraordinarily helpful.
Excellent. Joe?
Yeah, for those of you who are thinking about going out and raising money, you already have a full-time job running and starting your company. You're probably already working 80 to 100 hours a week at that. You're going to have to add another 30, 40 hours to do the capital raise. And you're going to have to try and convince people that you don't know, that you're the person that can do this, that you've got the market, you've got the solution, and you're going to talk to 100 before you get a whole lot of interest. So it's slogfest. It's not a slugfest, but it's a slogfest. And it's going to take a lot of your time. So just be emotionally prepared to do that.
Awesome, thanks. Do we have any questions from the online audience?
Not yet.
Nothing yet. Please jump in. Questions on funding. So we have one question over here. Do we have a microphone that we can use? Go ahead and ask your question, and I'll just re-say it for you.
Just wanted to follow up with Matt. You told the story about your first company and bootstrapping, but with your second company, with your current company, you went with VC or with funding right away. So I'm just curious about your thought process the second time around.
Yeah, the origin story of Yardstik is product market fit was already established and incubated, and so the idea was, okay, let's get this to market as fast as possible, and let's look at strategic partners that are going to help us do that. So we partnered with Rally Ventures here in Minneapolis, and Crosslink Capital, which is out of the West Coast. And sharing the business idea for that seed funding, they got really excited about what we're trying to do and drive forward with the human security platform for platforms. So there's a bit of product market proof already, and that is now accelerating our seed stage.
Shane, do you have anything else to add to the question of, what makes the difference in deciding to self-fund or bootstrap versus raise?
I don't think it's an either-or question, actually. One thing is that I think you're going to have a lot better luck when you get some traction to raise money. That's kind of obvious, I guess. But trying to raise money early on, it's got to be people you know. I know Joe mentioned it takes a while to get to know people. Well, I would say that raising money earlier stage is all about who you know, and getting out and trying to raise money before you even need money. And so starting to tell the story, get people excited about what you're doing so that when you deliver on that, then you've got a line of people ready to say, oh, okay, you already accomplished what you said you were going to do. I think I see too many people try to go get money too early, definitely, but they also try to go and get money from, they think they're going to go get money from Rally, as an example, or one of the bigger groups. Those groups have a lot of options. And so if you're going to them with a not as established as they're used to seeing, you have no chance. So don't spend a lot of time trying to go after the big fish. You got to learn and go to your friends and family, angel investors, some of the smaller VCs in town that really focus in this area, because they're also going to bring a lot of good relationships and introductions that'll help you early on. Matt doesn't necessarily need introductions, although they still help, I guess, on the capital raise side. It's a different introduction Matt needs today. But when you're first starting, you need introductions to people that are just going to help you growing as an entrepreneur. And that needs to be, I think, local is helpful.
So here's a question. Traction Capital really believes in EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. You may have seen a book by Gino Wickman. So panel, do you use EOS? And if so, how does it help you in your capital needs, or know what your capital needs may be? Matt, you want to jump in? I know you're a believer.
Yeah, I'm a tattoo EOS on my shoulder here. Been implementing on it for 12 years, and what I found with EOS with Magnet, it actually helped us decide to go all in on Salesforce. We actually had 6 businesses going on within one little company, and we were hitting the ceiling. When we decided to go all in and just focus that focus and be the best in the world at Salesforce Consulting, EOS helped us with that process to really hone in, which then set the stage for what are we trying to do for growth, what are we trying to do, what are the relationships we need to do, how are we going to expand market, and as we started to get traction, which is what the book is based on, you started to see this amazing flywheel start to happen, and then with that created new accounts, new revenue, new opportunity for funding. So for me, I remember sitting down with Salesforce over lunch, their head of ventures, and I had this it was 56 pages of how great Magnet 360 was, and he's like, yeah. He's not engaged. And I got to the front side of our VTO, which is a tool in Traction, and it was vision, and he pulled out his pen and he started crossing. He's like, you want to be the best in the world at Salesforce, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. And I was like, yep, that's the vision of the company. And he flipped it over, and he's like, what are you doing next year? Oh, you're going to do this, this. All right, I'm thinking we're interested now. So I had 56 pages of fluff, and all he cared about was a 2-page VTO, which I thought was amazing, because that's everything I believed in my company versus the architecture that I had designed to get him excited. And so those tools, those processes, those things really helped solidify the vision and create alignment and a good partner when they funded.
How else has EOS used? Barb, I think you might have been ready to say something. How else has EOS helped identify capital needs?
Well, I think a lot corporate side first and then down into early stage. You know, we were used to very big processes and structures when we would buy or sell organizations or even fund them. And that's like Six Sigma Lean, very old school, very heavy. You know, early stage, it would just choke us on process. And when we started working and doing a lot more on the mid caps and early stage, and EOS was first, you know, coming out, it really was a great way to kind of scale for the right age and stage to help you figure out what's your dashboard, what are the key things that you have to really get done, you know, today, in the next, you know, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And it allows everybody in the group to start to speak the same language. So in a lot of the early stage companies that we work with, and those ourselves that we built, everybody came with different backgrounds. And EOS allowed us to have a common communications backbone, as well as it being an operational tool. It really helped us speak the same language on a weekly basis. We could check in, and it was very powerful. And the investors, when they're out looking, it's one of the key questions they ask now. What is your methodology or process that you're doing to show that your allocation of funds are actually behaving the way you want them to be, and that you're performing how you'd like to?
Joe, jump in.
Both Matt and Barb touched on focus, and I think that's, to me, the biggest advantage. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, you saw a shiny object, and you went for it. But that's also your biggest problem and issue, is that you'll see another shiny object, you want to go for it, and another one, go for that. EOS helps you maintain your focus on your initial shiny object, and you have to pivot, it helps you do that too. But at least it holds you accountable for your deliverables, and everyone in your company accountable for their deliverables, so you all stay focused on the same shiny object. I like what Matt was referring to.
I think it's clinically diagnosable too, shiny object syndrome, and we're all familiar with that. So we touched on this earlier, but if a founder is looking for a financial partner or investment, what should they be careful of while choosing one? Shane.
Of course.
Surprise.
First, huh? Mike, I can answer. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
I ran into a company that was raising money, and they went to what they called another venture capital company. And this other venture capital company wanted them to sign an exclusive agreement, and then that company was going to go out and raise the money. No. If you go with professional money, they've got the money for you. So there's some scamming going on out there in the VC world, and you got to be pretty knowledgeable about what you're getting into and who you're talking to. So just do your background checks, just like you would an employee. Do your background checks on your VC and who those people are and their track records.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people out there that will say they'll invest in a company until they actually write checks. So if you're asking for referrals or you're talking to your network, don't just ask if they know somebody that might want to invest. Ask somebody that they know is investing in deals, because it's a big difference between talking over a beer and actually taking your checkbook out. Other hurdles, I don't know, Matt, do you have one you can think of?
Tyler, anything to add? When you're looking for a financial partner, or as you look back on your financial partners, some of which are sitting next to you, red flags to look out for, or things that you really appreciated?
Well, I think to Matt's point earlier, a culture fit is important. And there are people that if you're not going to get along with, and like somebody mentioned earlier today, many business partnerships last longer than marriages. And to be mindful of that is really important. And to Joe's point, I've had a couple of prospective investors want me to sign, non-competes and non-disclosures on different things on their front, and I want to be really careful about what I'm going to sign that might exclude me from opportunities in the future.
Yeah, really good point. Let's jump to some audience questions. Kelly's indicating she has a microphone in her hand. She's ready to say something. Who's asking, and what are they asking?
Yeah, so Joe Hobson asks, what's the most common mistake you see when a company does their first capital raise?
Jump in, Tyler.
I find that many entrepreneurs, if it's their first fundraise in their life, either think way too small or way too big. And on the small front, if you're raising 25 or 50 grand, well, maybe it's a quick investment from somebody, but to go through the process, the first time I raised capital, it was probably 100 lunches and dinners. That's a lot of time. Next time I raise money, it's never going to be less than $250,000 or $500,000 because of the amount of time that goes into it. And then I think all of that's really important to be mindful of.
Absolutely. Anyone else to add?
Maybe a caution after you get your money. Does that count as an answer?
Sure.
A lot of times, entrepreneurs will be struggling so hard, they haven't gotten any money, they're bootstrapping it, all of a sudden they get their money. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes a switch flips in their head, and instead of going out and buy a $50 ergonomic chair, they go out and buy a $600 Arion. And then the money goes away. They think, the money's going to last forever, but it just bleeds so quick. So don't let that flip switch in your head that all of a sudden, I got all the money now, I'm just going to go out and spend frivolously. Don't do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. It can go both ways, actually, though, too. Yes. People get used to bootstrapping, and then they have capital, and they aren't ready to scale with that money. The other thing I see a lot, and some businesses it works for, but overvaluing what their business is worth. I've seen so many people waste a year plus trying to raise money at a high valuation when they could have closed so much faster at a more reasonable valuation that was providing a decent return for the person putting the money in. At the end of the day, some people get so tied up in what's the worth of this business or the worth of my time. You also got to remember the person giving you a check has that same thing going on in their head, right? So there has to be a meeting of the minds around that. And I would say I've seen some of the best entrepreneurs at raising money that I know that have tried to raise at high numbers. It doesn't matter how good you are at raising if the number isn't reasonable and people can't buy into that valuation.
And you have to know what the money's going to be used for. That's a big question we ask as founders come to us. What is the use of capital? And is $25,000 the number, or is it $500,000? And what are you going to use it on, and how long is that going to get you?
One thing I want to add to what Shane had mentioned is, in the marketplace that you are building your startup in, you obviously gain your knowledge of that marketplace. But when you're going out looking for money, the investor has, let's say, $1 million, right? That $1 million is competing not only you in your marketplace, but everywhere else that investor can invest that money. So to Shane's point, if your valuation is $8 million and they can get the same return for the $1 million on a $5 million valuation, even though you may not see that other company as a competitor, they are a competitor for the money. And it's an opportunity cost. So that's a big concern with investors is if I invest $1 million here, what is my opportunity cost for investing it there? Because I could invest it here, there, or there. So you've got to understand that also when you're asking for money, what do I look like? It's just not my direct market competition, but it's who else is looking for the money and who else is that venture capital company or investor looking at.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really important point because at the end of the day, people are investing in people. And when we're in a lot of these, you could have the best presentation with all your T's crossed, your I's dotted, but at the end of the day, if that cultural click or the chemistry click doesn't hit, lots of times it could be perfect and it throws it out. So just be sure you know your audience. I think one of the biggest challenges I see in working with firms for money is be sure you've done your homework on the people. Know their backgrounds, understand what makes them tick. Be sure you communicate what makes you tick and what's important to you. And that, I think that full transparency really helps the cycle a lot, in addition to all the other things mentioned.
That's a really great point, Barb. We're looking at the founder first and foremost, and we're investing in that founder. We're also investing in the business and the product or the service, but the founder, absolutely. Kelly, another question from the audience online?
Yes, Seisha Hart asks, what are the best and or most typical ways to find angel investors?
Angels. Has anyone found angels?
Being present at events like this. I mean, there are a handful, if not many, angel investors in this room right now. When there's a panel, I frequently try to meet those panelists after the panel. When there's an investment conversation. Today at Twin Cities Startup Week, there are so many different events. Being able to reach out to those people, being present to be able to meet them, goes a long ways to find angel investors.
Absolutely. Anyone else on?
And then ask those angel investors that you meet for their friends.
I would say the thing that helped me when I raised the fund 2 years ago was I had a vision of doing this for 10 years. And so I had been keeping names and contact with people for 10 years. One, I like them, but two, I knew eventually I was going to raise a fund, and I had a very purpose-driven behind it, and I knew I wanted business owners from Minnesota. We ended up with 55 business owners from Minnesota as investors in our fund. We have no institutional money. It's all high net worth, mostly business owners, and that was very intentional. But if I would have just started about, building my network the day before I raised my fund, there's zero chance I would have raised the money.
Awesome. We're going to we have one question in the back there, and then go ahead.
I'd be curious in your views of raising for common stock or convertible notes or safe notes, what your thought is?
Myself?
Any of you? Go.
Sure, I'll go. I don't like safe notes. We're usually an earlier stage post-revenue investor, and I feel like that's, let's determine today what we both agree is value, because otherwise you're just kicking it down the future, and really that's just, in my opinion, it's not advantageous for us. You're going to use our money to get to that next hurdle, so why should, even if it's a discounted amount or whatever, why should I pay that higher amount someday, right? We do mostly preferred stock. We prefer C Corps, and we'll do convertible notes as well and warrants, but it just depends. My preference is simple structure. At the end of the day, I want to keep it as simple as possible, not just in case we do raise more money, but also just let's go build the business instead of worrying about the structure of all the different ways you can structure stuff. So.
Okay, panel. I'm a founder. I've got a business I've started. I'm going to go raise money. You're a venture capitalist. You're an angel investor. You're a bank. You're a friends and family. You put on whichever hat you want. What are you looking at to determine if my company's fundable?
You.
Agreed.
To add a little more color than you. I would say, at a VC level, you're looking for momentum, and you're looking for proven bookings and sales generation up front. You got to see that momentum. You've got some type of growth engine. You're getting the sales qualified leads in. You're starting to you have a high close rate, and now you need the funding to put the gas on and just repeat those numbers at a different level. So I think about momentum. I think about product market fit. I think about, do you have the sales engine in place? And then certainly you culturally first and foremost is most important. There needs to be a fit. But those are the other things that I'd be looking at based on wearing a VC hat.
I'll add a little more than agreed. Friends and family, they're investing in the relationship that you have with them. Angel investors are investing in an area or a topic they know and they like, right? It's more passion. And then VCs, like Matt said, is more metric-driven and performance-driven stuff. So that's kind of the gambit. Relationship, area of passion and like for an angel, and then metrics for a VC.
Yeah, and I can add a couple more words. Your team 2 more words to be specific, would also be there. And it's more so, can you build a team, right? Not as much do you have the best people in the world do with you, but can you build culture? Can you build a team? Because that's eventually what you're going to build off of. That's definitely a big one for me as well.
Barb, anything to add? I couldn't tell if you were trying to jump in there.
Yeah, I was actually sorry I had it on mute, but that's
That's
okay. No, I'd agree with what Shane just covered, 100%.
Excellent. So to kind of carry on from that, in that world where I'm the founder raising money, what mistakes am I making along the way that you've seen?
The biggest mistake that I've seen, and this makes me run away, is arrogance in the founder. Don't be arrogant. Don't profess arrogance. It just will not work. It actually makes me kind of shiver and run away when I see arrogance in a founder. That's just not a place for arrogance to be.
That doesn't mean don't have confidence. You know, the arrogant side is one aspect, and there's a fine line for sure, but you got to demonstrate that you know your market, you know how you're going to deliver, you know you're going to win, you built the best team, you got the best product. That they'd be foolish not to invest in you. I mean, there needs to be that essence of like, I got this, you know, from the standpoint of how you're going to move this business forward, and show that passion. But there is a fine line of don't cross the line, which can balance, and you only get that figured out by practicing it 1,000 times in the mirror. And knowing, you know, how you're going to come off and do that. And don't show up and wing it. Practice for your friends, practice for your families. If you have angels or friends, get in front of them and get that feedback. You know, as Yardstik's looking at our Series A, I'm going through a whole process of continual feedback, I'd like to say, where I'm meeting, I'm getting feedback, I'm adjusting, I'm meeting, I'm getting feedback, and I'm adjusting, and just be ready for that to be able to take it forward.
Yeah, I think of that as coachability maybe for me, is, you know, as somebody, they don't need to take what we say and do everything, but there needs to be a component of listening to our experiences and finding the niches in there that can help you grow as an entrepreneur. Yeah, and I think Joe just said it, like that's just such cringeworthy when you can usually tell when somebody's not open to ideas and thoughts. And as an investor, that's a major turnoff, because if that's a problem when you're trying to raise money, imagine how bad it gets once you have my money. It definitely is not pretty.
Audience questions or online? Looks like we have one online, and then if anybody else wants to grab a question, just raise your hand and we'll get you a microphone. Kelly?
Seisha Hart asks, what are the ways that you've overcome the fear of asking for investment, funds, partnerships, especially as a new founder?
Practice and ask. Like Matt was just saying, it's valuable to practice in front of a mirror. I find that thinking about it, there's that TED talk of before you go into an important presentation or important sales meeting, to go in the bathroom and look yourself in the mirror and just be big, think large, think confident thoughts. And the more you think confident thoughts walking into that meeting, the more likely you are to succeed with your goals of that conversation.
So for me, it was something I don't love to do, raise money, which might seem strange to somebody that just raised a fund, right? But I had to fight through it, just like we all do as entrepreneurs. We have to do things that we don't love. And for me, Matt was helpful, and I started blocking off time blocks for just making phone calls and getting out there. Getting big wins early on with people you know really well, in my case, was absolutely a big motivator, driver. It just made it easier. So, you know, when I got names like John Folkstead and Scott Littman and Dan Mallon and people that were very influential at Meents in the community, that also helps a lot. But I also would say, don't list people on your investment deck, in my opinion, if they're not investors. Like, it's not hard to go get people to spend some time on a board or to help you out as an advisor. If they're not writing a check, to me at least, that's not firm commitment, in my opinion. And so anyway, I was able to get people like that to write checks. Then I just started getting confident. But literally, I would schedule 5 hours because I knew it would take me 2 hours to get going into my calling because I don't love to do it. So I just found a way around my own issue, yes.
Yeah, and I like to precede the idea. And so the idea is build your relationships and then sit down and come from a point of view of advice instead of asking right away for the funds. It's like, what do you think? What's the feedback? You know, I'm out in market, I'm out talking to people, and I'd appreciate that input. And then a quarter from now, I actually might come back to you with a pitch that I'd love to share with you and get your continual feedback or gauge your interest in investment. So I think those are ways. And for those that are nervous about networking and relationship building at events like this, like you walk up to somebody and you say, "Hi, how's it going? Matt Meents, and you are?" Shakari, Scott, nice to meet you. And that's it. And then Shakari makes sure she's talking to somebody, because when she's talking to somebody, she's going, "Oh, and this is, and this is, and this is." So it's your name, nice to meet you, and you are.
Well done, Matt. Any other questions in the room here or online? All right, I'll keep firing away. What could eliminate a company from consideration in making an investment? We touched on this a little bit already, but what's just a hard no?
There are unlimited things that can be a hard no. From experience raising capital, the no could be anything. They don't like the color pink on your shirt. They just don't resonate with that color. There are lots of reasons that investors say no. And I had a sales coach when I was young, and one of the things that she taught me, she said, "Tyler, when you're going and selling or raising capital, people are going to say no a lot. And instead of feeling that rejection, count the no's. Instead of trying to count the yeses and waiting and demotivating yourself, when you count the no's and keep that number rising, you will get yeses. And that confidence in you will help that conversation. As all of us have described, confidence, it helps a lot. That passion is really important. Investors want to see that passion.
Yeah, I had well over 400 people tell me no. So, and I think I had 74 say yes. So it's a matter of getting used to timing is a lot for people. I've found actually that the no's, because we kept communicating, several I turned into yeses too, by the way. So don't always take no necessarily the first time. But anyway, the ones that said no have become some of our best referral sources. And so I get deals all the time from people that told me no to invest in the fund. And most of the time it was based on timing, not that they didn't believe in me or my fund. And that's why they said no. So I'm the first one that takes them very personally. I remember having days where I would get nowhere in my opinion, but to Tyler's point, I did my best to channel Tyler and Matt's mindsets of get more no's, because eventually the yeses will come.
Yeah, and I think the product market fit is going to be a piece. The momentum, if it's a person that's not passionate about the industry, or if that VC firm, it's not a focus. If it's a security only VC firm and you're pitching something nothing to do with security, even though they may be having the conversation, those are the things you gotta kind of do your due diligence on and understand what their primary areas of focus are. And be able to figure out, what's going to be really synergistic within their current portfolio, because the current portfolio is going to create a lot of value for you and you for them. And so I would think as you're positioning things, you're out looking at those portfolios, or if you're meeting with somebody that's invested in other deals, what are the typical deals that they like? And that'll help you shape your story versus just being so off base and getting that no right away.
Absolutely, and I think I would tag on to that is the knowing where they are in their fund, because they run on 10-year cycles, and you might even find one that's a great fit for all the right reasons, but if they're in year 7 and beyond, usually they are investing their powder in the second and third tranches that their investment portfolio needs. So be sure, if you can, to also understand where those people, whether they're VCs or other, where they are in the cycle of their fund as well.
That's a really good point, Barb. Thanks for sharing that. And that's specifically on the venture side. So let's talk about some of the different options for funding, whether it might be self-funding and or bootstrapping, or friends and family, angels, venture capital. How does a founder decide where are they at and where should they raise? Talk us through some of that from your own experience.
I find that raising capital from client prepayments, is oftentimes easier and far less costly than many other methods. Even if you offer a 10 or 15% off or 20% or more, that's still less expensive capital than raising capital, or potentially what a bank's going to give you if you are a startup. I find that raising capital from clients, first and foremost, helps a lot, and then family and friends.
Yeah, and if you're new to this world, I started, basically my first company was a side hustle, doing consulting while I was working somewhere else on weekends. Did a lot of work. We created a software platform. We'd work Friday night through Sunday and then deliver the software. Back then it was on a floppy disk on Monday. And then we'd go to work all week, and then we'd get to the house on Friday. We'd get a pot of coffee going, and we'd work all weekend long and then deliver the next rev of the software. And we ended up saving up like 15 grand, my partner and I, based on that. And we were like, maybe we should do this full time. We got 15 grand and let's do it. And we did. And then started January of 2001. And the dot-com bubble, which is what we were working on, is building web applications, happened, and then 9/11 happened. So it was a terrible time to actually start a business. But we had 15 grand, and we did get a couple more customers, and just took off from there. But we had a side hustle going on. So that's a nice way from a risk standpoint to prove it out, get a little bit of capital, and then run forward.
So fast forward a little bit. You went from side hustle and bootstrap to raising capital. Talked a little bit about in between and why one decision made sense at one time and another decision made sense at another time, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's all about focus and confidence. So when we had that 15 grand, it was kind of like we were both in technology and IT, and we kind of thought if we don't make it, we could go get another a programming job. And we never looked back. And then as we grew the organization, we hit a ceiling, because I mentioned earlier we had 6 businesses operating in one because of the squirrel shiny object syndrome that I had. And that was where we decided to just say, look, that was in 2008, which was another downturn, and basically said, look, we're not going to survive if we don't pivot to something that we're doing really, really well in, which was Salesforce. And then we went forward, and then once we got focused, got known for that focus, we then were able to raise some funding from Salesforce, as I talked about. So making that decision, though, this will happen depending where you are in your journey. You may have 6 businesses in your one business. You think it's all one business, but it's actually 6. If you can get to that focus, it kind of sets you free. The issue that happened, though, is as soon as I said we're only focusing on Salesforce, we had 30 people at the time, 15 quit because they didn't want to focus on Salesforce. But I'll tell you what, the next 15 we hired, that's all they wanted to do. And that's an example of how that focus starts to drive forward. That momentum catches its momentum and can push you forward. So a little rambly on your question, but it all depends on where you're at in the journey and the focus and where you need money to expand.
It's all good. Appreciate it, Matt. Any other questions from the audience? Kelly's got one online.
Yes, Seisha Hart, she says, thanks for entertaining my many questions, smiley face. One more. Is it typical or atypical for investors to change the trajectory, purpose, or mission of the founder's company if they're considering investing?
I don't think I'd use the word change. There's input, there's advice, there's influence around. Many investors know things that an entrepreneur doesn't. It's ultimately the entrepreneur's decision, but that that connection, that wisdom that comes from having wise investors can influence that company trajectory immensely. I had a board meeting once with some of my investors, and I remember I was walking through 3 different visions of the future of the company and what direction should we go. And it was one of the more influential board meetings of my life because the answer I got back was, Tyler, we don't care. This is your company. You decide which direction you want to go, and we'll help you get there. That was immensely valuable for me to know at that point. And I think some entrepreneurs fear the control or power an investor is going to have. That's just never been my experience.
Anything else?
Yeah, I think if the investor has that in mind, you may have a culture mismatch between the founder and the investor. I mean, I haven't seen that. In fact, it's the first time I ever even gave it a thought that an investor would actually want to change the direction of the company. Totally agree with advice and mentorship and all of that, but it never even crossed my mind, so obviously I would never do it.
Yeah, one of the first deals that we did, there was a debate before we even invested that they brought up, hey, we're thinking about A, B, or C. I mean, so we helped them through that, but it wasn't like only if you do A, we're going to invest, you know? I mean, we might end up on B, but as a group, we said, all right, we're going to invest and let's go after A. I think there's a point where eventually investors, especially with large checks into your business, can become more influential, but just don't let it get there. Perform at the end of the day. Then it doesn't. I don't know of anyone that sees it as a performing entrepreneur that goes in and tries to change what they're doing. That's not going to happen. If somebody's failing or really not coming close to delivering on what they promised and what they want to build, then we start to, help them look at alternatives is the way I would put it as far as alternative options, but it's never, hey, go do this. If the person that I'm investing in doesn't know more about their industry than I do, we got a big problem.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah. We're sort of talking around this one topic, and then I think we need to wrap up by 1:10. Can I get a thumbs up? Yep, awesome. We got 3 minutes left. So we're sort of talking around misconceptions. It sounds like there's a very valid concern that was brought up online about an investor maybe changing the course, but it sounds like, at least in some of the experience of the panel, that might be a misconception in some cases. Talk about some other misconceptions that people may have about VC.
I think for a lot of startups, a lot of entrepreneurs fear giving up too much information to a prospective investor, and they want the investor to sign a non-disclosure. In reality, investors don't have the time or the interest to go try to start a competing business 99.999% of the time. And just being willing to share anything and everything you've learned, you're much more likely to get that investor on board.
Yeah, I think the misconception down to culture, I think in terms of, the questions I ask, and you should be potentially, based on my relevant experience, thinking about asking is, in good times, are you going to challenge me? And in bad times, are you going to support me? And then talk to some of their portfolio companies or others that they've invested and validate that. Because that's going to be your due diligence to understand if it's a good culture fit. Nobody's gonna be harder on yourself than when you're missing. Don't kick me while I'm down and support me and help me get back up. But when I'm kicking ass, maybe bring me down a little bit and keep pushing me harder. Because that's the right attitude to think about your partnerships there and validate that with the other funds or other portfolio companies. Ask to meet those CEOs, ask to meet those other investments.
One of the things that we actually do require, so I guess force, if you will, on somebody is EOS and using it. We were talking about earlier. That's one of the components of our fund. So that's an area where we require it, but that's going to help them create a structured process to make the decisions you just talked about and to have their team involved in those. And if they need us to help, we will. But that's a structure. Having a structure like that is super important in an early stage business. And it's why we require it for sure.
So
I think to that point, Shane, and just real quick, that it goes back to the chemistry again. Having people that have been in your shoes before, you're sitting there, you've had this great idea, you've built companies together. The people that are really great investors are those that have sat in your shoes and actually been able and both the good and the bad made it through. So I think, Shane, your point about being there and being open to help is more than just the check, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then, in our case too, we leverage our investor base, right? And so a lot of times if I have kind of a vision that maybe is a little different than the owner, I'll do my best to express that by bringing in people that have been there and done that, kind of what my idea is, so the person can see from someone else, not just me saying, hey, what do you think about this? It's more like, I just talked to Matt about meeting with one of my founders around culture, because I feel like we need a little uptick in our culture and in this company that I've invested in, and I think Matt is the best person I know about it. So I connect those two people so the founder can learn, get their own flavor of what Matt's done and what other people have done to build great culture.
Yeah.
So appreciate that very much. We do need to wrap up, but before we go, obviously we're trying to speak to founders here, and one resource that we firmly believe in for founders is a program called EO Accelerator. It's Entrepreneurs Organization Accelerator. It's a peer-to-peer learning and also mentorship from other entrepreneurs focused on companies that are $250,000 in revenue up to $1 million. We got a boat cruise on Lake Minnetonka next week. If you're interested, look us up. And I've got, you're welcome to connect with us as well. You can grab my QR code for LinkedIn, email and website are up there as well. Tyler looks like he was going to say something.
EO Accelerator has been one of the best investments I've made in my life. Now that was many years ago now, but I did it for 6 years. Phenomenal program, learned immensely. I would greatly advise entrepreneurs that are at that early stage to consider EO Accelerator.
Absolutely. And as you go through that process of being accelerated, you're going to learn a lot more about your capital needs and be exposed to a lot of different options that we've sort of discussed today as well around what those capital sources could be. So Shane's got one more thing to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and it gave me the honor of mentoring Tyler and Brian both in the EO Accelerator program. So you get a lot of great mentors right now. John Folksted's a mentor. Chris Carey's a mentor. Lots of people that have been there and done that in the business world that are giving their time to be mentors for this program. And so I highly recommend looking at it.
There we go. Reach out to us if you have questions, want to talk about capital or different raises. Thank you so much to Barb virtually and the rest of the panel in person. Thank you to everyone in person here today and people asking questions online. Have a great rest of Startup Week.
Thanks, everyone.